Hello everybody, thank you for joining the weekly InvestAnswers Q&A. This is where I take the top questions that come in from multiple subscribers and comments in the YouTube channel, and I address them live every weekend. So thank you for all the good questions, keep them coming in. And without further ado, let's jump right in and talk about the first question. The first question came in from Igor Feldman. He was thinking about leaps in MicroStrategy, but was worried that once an ETF comes, a Bitcoin ETF comes to the market, it may impact MicroStrategy itself. What are your thoughts? So, very good question. I have a lot of people asking me about the MicroStrategy trade. Does it make sense to buy MicroStrategy leaps? How to play it today? And first of all, an ETF should not threaten MicroStrategy at all. I think it's a very clean call option on the future of Bitcoin. And it also has some underlying intrinsic value as well beyond Bitcoin itself. Second of all, in terms of my trade update, how it's doing, as you all know, a quick reminder, I sold 10 contracts of the $290 puts for $105, and I bought the $300 calls for about $107, 10 contracts of each at a net cost of about $2,000. So right now the puts are at $45. That's a $60 gain on that position. Times 1,000 is $60,000, and the calls are at $385, up about $280,000 for a total gain of about $340,000. Now on Friday, MicroStrategy went up over 100 points in one day, and the reason I mention that is there's a thing called a delta ratio, and when you're looking at things like leaps, it's very important to understand the delta ratio, sometimes referred to as a hedge ratio, and how that compares the change in the price of the underlying asset with the change in price of the derivative or option. So the delta on my position, just so you guys all have it, on the put option it's about minus 9 cents. So every time MicroStrategy goes up $1, I make 9 cents. Times 1,000, you could do the math. And the delta on the call option is 90 cents. So every time MicroStrategy goes up $1, I make 90 cents. You add those two combined, you get 99 cents. So on MicroStrategy on Friday went up over 100 points. That was a $100,000 day in that position at one stage during the day. And that's the power of that position. But it's very important to understand this delta when you're actually buying leaps. Now, getting back to the question, does it make sense to buy leaps? Yes, it does. But you need to do two things. One, we have had 5 chances to buy the dip in January to get MicroStrategy under $500. And you also need to be able to pick the optimal leap, which is a perfect balance of the ratio between the intrinsic value and the time value. And I have a special ratio to do that. And I'm going to share that type of information in my Patreon channel, where I can share those trading secrets with you all. So remember, I put my money where my mouth is. And also, on a side note, one of my philosophies to trade is to solve my own problems. So for example, the MicroStrategy trade basically earned 2 years worth of salary in my previous job in a very short window of time. So when I talk about freedom, this is freedom. I also sold some puts on Shopify that paid 2 years of my mortgage payments. So the second question today is from Ciaran Cunningham, and he asks, how much of a correction do I expect in the next Bitcoin bear market cycle? And that's a tricky question, and none of this is investment advice. But first of all, it's a function of many things. Second of all, I see Bitcoin at $100,000 plus this year. And even if you look at my Bitcoin price prediction analysis, and I average 35 price predictions, it should go to $208,000. Even if Bitcoin hits these prices, it doesn't necessarily mean it'll sustain these prices. And anything can hit the actual price of Bitcoin. It could be a black swan event, such as another strain of C19, or heaven forbid, a dirty bomb attack in a major city. And this could bring about a 60% dip or even more very quickly. So we could go from 100,000 all the way back to 40,000, or from 200,000 back to 80,000. The question is, when will this happen? One thing as well that's also important to note is because of the crazy institutional demand right now and the derivatives coming and additional ETFs and this type of accumulation, these people are hodling. They're not trading, they're not selling. So that should remove some of the volatility from the price itself. So if there is a big event that brings about a crash, the crash shouldn't be as vicious and as nasty as it was in the past, where there's up to 80% losses in a matter of days. So I think things will level out over time. So this third question is from James Whittle, and he says, you hear a lot of people talk about Bitcoin price as if it were a human being, things like the price is trying to break or it wants to. What is your attitude towards this type of thinking? Is it healthy? Is Bitcoin a real living thing? And I love these questions because this one really made me think. So thermodynamically speaking, to use the words of Michael Saylor, because he likes to talk about laws of thermodynamics, and I remember years ago from biology class, living organisms are able to decrease their internal entropy and growth using free energy taken from the environment. So if you think of that analogy, miners help keep the Bitcoin animal alive. And in short, living things create order out of chaos. So this is basically what Bitcoin does. And the ledger is, you can consider it a growing organism every day. In fact, Elon Musk's tweet became part of that organism that's been branded into it forever. Bitcoin also has no leader, no CEO, no head, no marketing department. And to use a bad word, it actually spreads like a virus. If you look at the adoption around the world today, it is actually spreading like a virus, and everybody is familiar with the term Bitcoin right now. So it's not a nice analogy, but quite fitting in my mind as you pose the question. So net, another way to think about it as well is a lot of people compare Bitcoin to the honey badger. It's not afraid of anything, and it cannot be shut down. It's also an animal. But the weird irony of Bitcoin is it is infinitely inelastic, and that means it can't reproduce, which means it's not like an animal. So that would be a difference, but that is a really great question. Keep it coming. And I don't think it is in any way unhealthy to compare Bitcoin to an animal, because it has many aspects that are parallels with the animal kingdom. So question number 4 was from the Jolly Swagman. And his question was, do I believe the Bitcoin FUD is being orchestrated by anybody? So I don't think it's being orchestrated, but key members of the media are clear haters. For example, Tom Draper and the Winklevi twins were interviewed by John Fort this week on television, and that CNBC interviewer made a fool of himself. He was very aggressive and clearly very anti-Bitcoin. So if I was CNBC, I wouldn't have such anchors interviewing such very important people who are actually billionaires and way bigger than John Fort will ever be. Now, in terms of the FUD that hit Bitcoin last week or so, the smart people are clearly more powerful than the haters, if you look at my video from yesterday regarding the fours. However, there was so much bad news, the double spend news, the Yellen news, Janet Yellen, but then she changed her mind a day later, which was good. Another ECB head came out this week warning that Bitcoin could go to zero. Lagarde, of course, the corrupt head of the European Central Bank, had a lot of bad things to say. This morning, there was threats of another Indian ban on Bitcoin, and the Russian ban, and regulatory scares, etc., etc. It's a lot, but look how resilient Bitcoin is, and look at the people behind Bitcoin. And if that doesn't give you confidence that Bitcoin will survive all of this FUD, nothing will. But my opinion is, I don't think the FUD is being orchestrated, but I do think the people that didn't have a chance to buy Bitcoin until now are very upset because they feel like they've missed the boat and they're bitter inside. And this is how they express their bitterness. Fifth question is super interesting from Alan Lee. He asked, what is the best time to get into a bull market? And I laughed about this because I thought the answer is very short. It's one word. It's early. You get into a bull market early, but that's not a good answer. So I'm going to give you a different answer. So I think it's a fascinating question, and I may have a little bit of a controversial response. So if you ask anybody, 99 out of 100 people or investment advisors, and this is not investment advice, just to remind everybody, will tell you it's impossible to time the market. But I disagree with them. In fact, market timing is why I've been very successful. I think it's one of my skills, to time trades, to time opportunities, to find mispriced options and arbitrage and that type of stuff. And these are my favorite things to do. So if you took away my timing tool, I'd just be like everybody else. So just want to say that. Now, back to your question of a bull market. To consider a bull market like a rising tide, if you can identify when that tide is about to turn and be prepared and get out, that's a key question. I've gotten that so much from many people as well this week. I think it was triggered by a comment I made in one of my videos. But I will always keep my tabs on exactly when I believe that's about to turn. However, sometimes an existential event can happen to kick things back that is beyond our control, such as a black swan event. But we'll see what we can do. And in the meantime, just be prepared, have the tools, have things hedged. I sold $850 calls against my long Tesla position for $270 right before earnings, and I nearly bought them back for a tidy profit, but I'm still short those. Long term, I'm still very bullish on things like Tesla, but again, I am hedging my long positions just in case. There's one other thing I'd like to say as well, and not to be too long-winded, but the key to markets and investing is not only to be able to make money in a bull market. Anybody can make money in a bull market. It doesn't take any special skills. But how do you make money in a sideways market, flat market, or a market that's going down? That's the real secret, and that's also what I specialize in. And those tools are coming to you as well. And I'll start sharing some of my methodologies as well in my Patreon account. So remember, the trend is your friend. Whether it's up, down, or sideways, you can make things work to fit your particular needs with tools that are available. Now, final question of the day, the fun question of the day from a riverbird. What is your favorite food? So, one thing that has happened during these C19 times is I spent a lot of time at home and a lot of time cooking. I stopped going to restaurants. And my favorite thing to do is soak a cedar plank in water and cook fresh halibut on it with some grilled asparagus on the grill outside on my deck. So, that's my favorite food. That may change though. Everything is subject to change in this world. And again, this is not food advice. This is just an answer to a question. Hey everybody, I know hundreds of you have asked for my Patreon account. I never had one, but now it's live. Patreon.com/InvestAnswers is up and running. And in this, you'll be able to see some of my models and methodologies, my processes, exclusive videos around how I use technical analysis and some of my secret options trading methods, as well as a weekly chat with you members. Thank you always for all the support, and look forward to meeting